Hello and welcome back to RotoRadar NFL DFS Week 12. We're taking a first look today at the Sunday main slate, not the Thanksgiving main slate, but the Sunday main slate for Week 12. This is my first look. It's Tuesday. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. Basically a fresh first look at what the Week 12 slate brings. There's no bye weeks, so we have a full slate of games, even though we do have 3 games on Thanksgiving. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what I think are kind of the top overall plays through first glance. Again, take this with a grain of salt. Things can change very rapidly, as we all know. And with 4 days left, as you can see, it's going to be a long time before things are finalized for this slate. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the quarterback position first. As of right now, we have Mahomes here at the top along with Burrow. We know that Justin Fields is dealing with a separated shoulder. I believe that the injury report from Sports Injury Central, our favorite injury resource here, is saying that he should be good enough to go in this spot, but it is a tough matchup against the Jets, so probably outside of the first look for this week. We do have a nice streamer matchup for Tua Tagovailoa going up against Houston. Lots of scoring opportunities there. I already took a quick glimpse at some of the team totals here, and obviously Miami is going to be a team that we want to have some exposure to. We'll get there when we get there on that front. But as far as the other guys go, the quarterback pool is certainly interesting this week. I think it's all right. I think that there's opportunities for quite a few of these guys, kind of like what we saw last week. We did see the field kind of gravitate towards Josh Allen, who's not going to be on this slate. And I also think that, taking out some of the other options, you have Kirk Cousins playing on Thanksgiving, you have Daniel Jones, you have Dak Prescott. So some quarterbacks are off the board, but the majority of the ones we want are on this slate here. Justin Herbert against Arizona seems to be one that stands out to me at 7,900. The problem with Herbert, though, over the last month or so is that he's just not quite getting there in terms of the touchdowns, and that's really been the huge factor for me. Also, him not being able to throw for over 300 yards since this Houston game is somewhat concerning. That's kind of where my interest stops, although I do think that, if Mike Williams makes his way back, if Keenan Allen's going to have another productive week of practice, he is in a good spot. The touchdowns do have to go his way, though, in order for me to feel super confident about that. We all know that Arizona, we just saw the game last night against the Niners. They look absolutely pitiful in pretty much every single defensive statistic. So I think that that's an interesting spot there. Lamar Jackson just continues to not get that ceiling, man. His floor just continues to creep around that 15 fantasy mark, and I can't, in good conscience, find myself getting there. I think where I do want to start the conversation off is probably with Joe Burrow, who continues to put up massive numbers despite no Jamar Chase. This team is just throwing at extremely high clips like they were last season. We can talk about Samaje Perine as well. He's going to be a huge part of this conversation. And I think he's going to be actually the cover boy of the DraftKings first look tomorrow. So we'll see on that front. He was supposed to be a candidate for the first look today, but I didn't know 100% if Joe Mixon was going to sit out this week, which we don't really know. So with that being said, though, Joe Burrow is just fine. I think T. Higgins is fantastic. We'll get to him in a little bit here too. But yeah, the passing attempt numbers look great. The passing touchdown numbers look really solid, especially last week. I know the floor can be shaky. 14 is definitely something scary, but I think against Tennessee, with that secondary as ravaged as it is, that we should be able to find clear pathways to Joe Burrow putting up some fantasy points. But I think our first look guy, as of right now, is going to either be between Joe Burrow and Tua, and maybe I will take a few more seconds to think about that. But as far as the other guys down here, though, I think Geno Smith is interesting against the Vegas team, who's giving up some of the most egregious numbers in the passing game. Nothing really else stands out here. I'm done trying to target the Derek Carr train. I haven't really done it, but I've targeted his weapons, and that hasn't really worked out for me outside of Devontae Adams, who we'll talk about here soon too. Nothing stands out here for cash. I'm not really a pay down cash guy on Fanduel anyway, so I think that you kind of have to look at Burrow, Mahomes against the Rams, still kind of a tough matchup, so I'll probably be hesitant to go there at 9K. That seems like a lot of money for that kind of play. And then I think my options here are pretty much Burrow, Tua, and Justin Herbert. I think that's kind of where I would lean. So for the sake of this, I think I do want Miami exposure, but I think I'm going to go Joe Burrow as of right now at 8,600. For the running backs, we'll talk about Jeff Wilson here in a second because he is the cover boy. But at the top, we have Derrick Henry against Cincinnati, CMC against New Orleans, Austin Eckler, and Josh Jacobs to round things off at this top range. Leaving Kenneth Walker out of the conversation momentarily because I do want to highlight him separately. But CMC putting up pretty impressive numbers against the Cardinals last night and just was used so much in the passing game there. Passing game usage is super strong through 3 weeks on the San Francisco team. 9,200 feels like a lot for this price tag, especially if we know that if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's not going to probably hit value at this price tag. And we've seen a lot of Eli Mitchell in some of these second halves. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that CMC is a clear target. And I think that we kind of have to just take things with a grain of salt for this San Francisco team moving forward, as they have such an elite plethora of weapons. Austin Eckler against Arizona is a guy that stands out to me. I think that if you're not going the Herbert direction, you have to at least take a gander at Austin Eckler, who is putting up monster numbers in the passing game. He did lose a couple of targets to a couple of the guys on his team, and he kind of saved his fantasy day on Sunday night with that touchdown. So it's a little bit concerning that his touches are a little bit fluky and a little bit all over the place, but touchdowns should definitely still be there for him. Keep an eye on the Mike Williams thing. Keep an eye on Keenan Allen. See if that helps your decision making. But I don't mind some of these guys at the top end for GPPs. Who I want to talk about, though, is this Jacobs versus Eckler or versus Walker in the same game, and focus on Kenneth Walker here, who, last week was not a good indication of things, but we never really like to take Tampa Bay into consideration when talking about these running back plays. But when it comes to Kenneth Walker, this is the usage that we're going to see, right? The 21, 23, 18, 26, and the rushing touchdowns have been there outside of last week. What was really cool to see was this target share last week of 8 targets. I'm not expecting that for Kenneth Walker, but I do think that at this price point, he is one of the better bets for touchdown upside, as well as just fitting something in your build that actually makes a lot of sense. So I think Kenneth Walker going up against Las Vegas, we know how bad they are against the run. We know that Seattle likes to lean run heavy. I think Kenneth Walker is a very fine option for this weekend. Don't forget about Josh Jacobs either. He's had some pretty awesome performances this season. The rushing attempt numbers have looked great. I think you can potentially play one of the running backs in this game. However, as of right now, I'm going to lean with Kenneth Walker here at 8,400. Probably going to move him around to get him in our flex spot as he plays at the later time frame. But I definitely like that. So moving down the list here, we have to keep an eye on what's happening with this Joe Mixon spot. And we can potentially look at a guy like Samaje Perine, who is going to be way down on this list, considering that things aren't going to kind of go. They're probably not going to price him up. They won't be able to anymore because his pricing is already released. But the guy I do want to talk about in this range is Jeff Wilson Jr., coming in against the Houston run defense. Through a couple weeks now in this new offense, Jeff Wilson has clearly supplanted Raheem Mostert. And while Mostert's been getting some rushing attempts, I do think we can start to concentrate more on watching what Jeff Wilson's been doing. So I do think that there's upside for 15-plus rushing attempts, and I do think that there's actually kind of somewhat of a floor here in terms of the production in the passing game. We saw him get a receiving touchdown 2 weeks ago, and we saw him get 5 targets out of the backfield against Cleveland. And that's really, really good to see from him. And Miami's coming off a bye week too, so that's the best part about all of this, is that we get a healthy Jeff Wilson that's going to come in and take on a Houston defense that's been getting ravaged by pretty much everybody. So I like Jeff Wilson a lot. We're going to put him into the first look build as well. Raheem Mostert is just fine. He's probably going to be a GPP kind of conversation as the week moves along here, but I think a lot of people will circle around Jeff Wilson this week and start their builds there. So I like the spot. Makes a lot of sense. Home running back, favored team, high team total, and a guy that's under 8K that's going to get inside the 5 touches and some pass game work. I mean, sign me up. Jeff Wilson Jr., 7,700 on Fanduel. Makes a lot of sense. I don't love the entire situation for David Montgomery moving forward, especially if I know Khalil Herbert is going to be out, but Justin Fields having that shoulder injury may or may not affect Montgomery. If Montgomery gets more rushing attempts because of it, so be it. But this offense could take a huge hit if Justin Fields is not running the ball effectively. So I'm a little bit off that spot now these days. Leonard Fournette, this is going to be a true decision of whether or not Tampa Bay is going to move on and talk and get Rachaad White involved. Tampa Bay did not. They played the London game. They played the Germany game in week 10, and so we haven't seen them on a main slate in a while. And Fournette's just been completely inefficient when it comes to anything that he's doing. So I'm probably off of that, and that's more of a reason to be on Rachaad White the rest of the season. So we could see that happening this week and turning the tides. But as of right now at top play, it's just not going to happen on that team. James Conner against the Chargers is somewhat interesting here. He came in last night and did get that rushing touchdown. I knew it was going to be a tough matchup, and that's kind of why I faded him on the single game and showdown. Still ended up getting there, though. 5 targets, although they were inefficient targets. 14 rushing attempts against a really, really tough defense. If they get inside the 5-yard line and Kyler Murray is not the quarterback, James Conner is going to be the beneficiary of that. And even if Kyler Murray comes back, he's got a leg injury he's dealing with, so more reason to go James Conner's way. I think that at 7K, it's a very strong tag. So I'll probably, as of right now, I'm going to leave him probably out of the mix because I want to talk about one more guy. But James Conner certainly could make his way into final builds this weekend as a top 5 running back overall. I wouldn't, doubt on saying that. I'm now playing Kamara against the Niners, something that I just don't do. I've also just kind of stayed away from Kamara in general this season. Dameon Pierce against Miami, solid matchup, but again, what's the point of going to Pierce where you can just go for Jeff Wilson on the other side? And then it kind of gets uglier as we go along here. We do need to talk about the Denver situation, so we'll keep going from there. But Elijah Mitchell makes for an interesting GPP play. I don't play running backs against New Orleans ever, but with Cam out there, it does seem like there's at least something to say. Kenyon Drake burned the entire field who played him the other day with no Gus Edwards. Keep an eye on this situation because it could present itself once again. Rachaad White, if we find out any inkling of him starting over Fournette, makes for a clear, awesome play there. Raheem Mostert, like I said before, awesome GPP play. Now we get into the interesting range. I don't want any Kansas City running backs, but I do think that taking a look at Latavius Murray at 6,200, we know a few things here. We know that Melvin Gordon is no longer on this team, and that is basically making him the top option. We saw 17 rushing attempts against Las Vegas, and this is going to be a situation where he's going to be the team's primary back moving forward. And even more than that is we have this he's clearly the guy, and I think that even could go with the passing game too. So 6,200 is one of those freak kind of things where it happened after the Sunday pricing already came out, but it happened within enough time to where the site just couldn't react to it. So Latavius Murray is probably going to find himself pretty highly owned against Carolina, and I actually don't mind the spot. I think he's pretty solid. So it's going to come between him, and this is why I couldn't put James Conner in there right away. I think that he is fine. I also think we need to look at Samaje Perine, who's going to come in here extremely, extremely low owned. Not low owned, low price, I think. Unless they snuck that by me and I missed it. Did I miss Samaje, guys? Oh, I did. Samaje Perine, 6,600. I think this is going to be a very interesting spot. He went absolutely nuclear against Pittsburgh last week, got 2 touchdowns, or 3 touchdowns. I think that this is actually really, what's the word? I think this could be a kind of a trappy spot. First look. I think that if Joe Mixon is out, which if you have a concussion that you left the game for, there's less of a chance that you're going to play in this one. I think that they'll probably give Mixon the day off here for Week 12, and we'll see Samaje Perine come in. I think that there's clear pathways to 20-plus touches and passing game work, and inside the 5 touches, all of that is there. I just think that when you're playing a guy like Perine versus Latavius Murray, I think I feel a little bit stronger with what Murray's workload looks like compared to Perine. But again, first look, I could be wrong. You actually could play both of them, and I'd be totally comfortable with doing that. So there are situations where you take Kenneth Walker out of the mix, you put in Latavius Murray, and you play Samaje Perine there. So I think there's 4 or 5 running backs that I really feel comfortable about. It's Kenneth Walker, Jeff Wilson Jr., Samaje Perine, James Conner, and Latavius Murray. I think that those are a very clear starting 5 that you can feel really good about. And that's kind of why this range up here doesn't feel as solid, right? I think Josh Jacobs is in a strong spot. I think Eckler's in a strong spot too. I think Henry is just fine for the amount of carries that he's going to get against Cincinnati. That hasn't looked great against the run. Najee Harris was able to be like the most efficient that he's been in a certain amount of time here against that Cincinnati defense. So I could see you going back to Henry as well. Just really, really interesting plays at the 6K range because of either injury or a cut situation. So I think right now, to make things easier, and we can always switch this at the end of the show, but let's take Kenneth Walker out. And I'm just going to be OCD here just to make sure that everything fits, but we're going to put Wilson here. I think that you can play Burrow and Pirine and feel all right about it as of right now. So we're going to go ahead and just do that for the sake of this show again. If we find out that we can spend up at this position, then we'll do so at the end of it. But let's put this here, and let's put Latavius Murray in our flex spot and go from there. Again, first look, I don't normally like playing running backs and quarterbacks in the same build, but just for the sake of doing this video, let's go ahead and put that in there and move on to the wide receiver position. Tyreek Hill, 9,200. Considering that we have Wilson, I don't really feel the need that we need to go here. Tyreek Hill, outside of that touchdown last week or 2 weeks ago, really kind of that touchdown kind of saved his day. The targets have kind of fallen off the past couple of games, which has been a little bit surprising, but I think that he'll be fine coming off of rest here. The only problem I see, though, is that against Houston, this Miami team should not have to put up a fight, and we've seen the times that he really thrives in these shootout games. Chicago was a shootout game. Detroit was a shootout game. Minnesota was a shootout game. And Baltimore was obviously the best shootout game of the year. So you're going to try to find Tyreek Hill and use him in shootout scenarios. I just don't think this is one of them where you have to worry about that. Devontae Adams going up against a tough matchup in Seattle. Kind of feels like it's Devontae Adams' world right now. And while the Raiders are still losing games, Devontae Adams, has been absolutely incredible in the last 3. I mean, the dude has, quick math, why can't I do math today? 44 targets in the last 3 weeks. I mean, that's even bigger than what he was getting in the Packers at some stints. So clearly, this is his room. He's got 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Raiders are they're already out for a lot of people, right? They're already out of the playoff race for a lot of people, but they're still mathematically alive. And if that's the case, we need to look at Devontae as a guy that can get a lot of targets against Seattle. Jamar Chase looks like he could potentially return here, which I was going to love talking about T. Higgins, but as of right now, if Jamar Chase is out, then T. Higgins is a fantastic play. If Jamar Chase is in, still think T. Higgins is a very strong play, although he probably is not as cash viable as he once was. Still think that Jamar Chase will be limited coming into this week, but since we're recording this on Tuesday, this is the first day that we would even see him try to practice. So I don't know what to do with this as of right now, but like I said, if Chase is out, then T. Higgins is like one of the best wide receiver plays on the slate. If Jamar Chase is in, then I worry about, we kind of have to look at snap count and have to look at a few other things and beat reporters and stuff like that in order to make those decisions. So that's that. As of right now, though, I think I prefer Devontae, even though the matchup is definitely tougher than it would be against Tennessee. Hopkins against the Chargers, I don't really want to do that. No, thank you. Although the volume is there, right? The volume's definitely been there. He was one catch away from going for 100 yards yesterday, so that's something I'm looking at. As far as everybody else, though, I think that this is probably at the GPP range of things, and I'll probably end up staying away as far as first looks for cash. Sorry, guys, my cat knocked down my mouse here, so I'm getting that right now. Always count on Keith to mess up a stream. Anyway, moving down the list here. Jalen Waddle against Houston, nice GPP play. I think that Amari Cooper being back at home is actually kind of interesting. He actually defied the home road splits that we always talk about. So that was kind of interesting to see him go completely nuclear on the road here in that spot. As far as everybody else goes, though, I mean, Christian Kirk had an awesome game against Kansas City. It's just not something I really want to rely on. Maybe we'll find our way towards him a little bit, but 7,700 for Kirk just feels like it's way too much money at the end of the day, so I'll probably end up staying off there. Terry McLaurin against Atlanta. We played him last week on DraftKings. He kind of got halfway there for us. I would have wanted more at the end of the day, though, to be completely honest with you, so I'll probably keep an eye on this one. Maybe it's more of a DraftKings play this week, but 7,500 for McLaurin is something we should actually consider. Anyway, the spot here, moving down the list, I think Keenan Allen is somewhat interesting if we find out that Mike Williams is going to be missing time. The Mike Williams injury was kind of strange to see unfold the other day, so hopefully he's all good there, but that is somewhat concerning. Moving down the list, though, there's nothing too much that stands out here. Nothing really standing out to me. Marquise Brown should be good enough to go in this spot, which is going to also take away some of DeAndre Hopkins' stuff. This New Orleans-San Francisco game is super gross, and so you're going to find that these guys, since they didn't play last night, since they played last night and pricing has been out, they're going to seem that they're underpriced. Like Deebo Samuel at 6,900, it's going to feel a little bit underpriced, but I just don't know if I can necessarily pull the trigger on that. If we find out that Mike Williams is out, I think you can take a look at Josh Palmer at 6,800. Feels like a lot, but you are getting one of the stronger roles in one of the better matchups on the slate if Mike Williams does miss. Allen Robinson, should talk about him now. Obviously, Cooper Kupp, you really didn't do that much, and it kind of got saved by a touchdown. And I know that the Rams are going through it, and this is probably not the best idea to go here. I'm personally not going to take advantage of it just yet. I want to see more targets, right? Like, you want to see 8 to 10 targets for the wide receiver one, and like Skarnek didn't do anything. The running game sucked. The Rams just looked bad on Sunday without Cooper Kupp, so I would assume more of the same from that kind of thing. Brandon Ayuk against New Orleans is somewhat interesting if Marshawn Lattimore's ruled out. Keep an eye on Juju Smith-Schuster. That's an interesting spot for him. Curtis Samuel. I'd be more inclined to play Samuel over McLaurin this week. Atlanta, you always want the clear matchup there. For whatever reason, A.J. Terrell is in. That could prevent McLaurin from being as effective. So Curtis Samuel could be that guy in the mid-6 range that people try to target. I don't mind that. Demarcus Robinson, a guy that was super surprised me. 9 targets for 128 yards the other day. That feels like an outlier, doesn't it, guys? I just feel like this is who we think Demarcus Robinson is, and since the injuries to the team, he's kind of been trending upward in that direction. I want to keep an eye on Robinson. I don't love that he's like if he was 5,800, I'd feel much more comfortable about playing this, but 6,200 could be something to at least take a look at. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on what the injuries to the rest of this team look like, but nothing on Jacksonville really is scary enough for me to stay away from there. So we'll circle back on some of this stuff. We do need to talk about Drake London, though, because he is 6,100 going up against Washington, where we know that Washington does really well defending the run, but they are not a good team in defending the pass. And we just saw that Kyle Pitts is most likely going to be missing the rest of the season, if not already missing the rest of the season, which I think he is, season-ending surgery. So Drake London, 6,100. I understand that I've avoided this play pretty much all season, and he did nothing against Chicago, although he did get the touchdown for 2 receiving yards. So this is I'm kind of hesitant, as you guys can tell, back and forth on this, but this is interesting to say the least. And so I'm going to put Demarcus Robinson and Drake London in my builds as of right now to kind of go with this clear and balanced look, or fair and balanced look, I should say. Life of Goosey says Lamar said it himself about building better chemistry with him. I feel better about Demarcus Robinson than I do Drake London, just for starters. So if anybody's wondering if I were to pick somebody to take out first, I'd probably take out London. He just has not shown up in this offense this year outside of a couple times. And, I'm hoping that there's a situation where, maybe we even see Desmond Ridder come into this Atlanta game. I'm not sure if that's a little bit too early in the season to say, but it could definitely happen in this spot. As far as other guys go, though, Nothing super stands out that I want to talk about. This is kind of a clear situation of like if injuries go one way or the other, this is where you're going to find some additional value. So keep an eye on the Jerry Jeudy spot. Keep an eye on the Rondale Moore groin situation because that could affect things, especially if Hollywood doesn't make it. Like Greg Dortch is probably in the low 5Ks. We should talk about Treylon Burks as he did kind of break out against this Green Bay team last week. 8 targets, 7 for 111. I don't expect him to be this efficient, but in this spot, Tennessee should be forced to pass here at least a little bit. And coming off of a tough matchup against Denver, would expect to see around 6 to 8 targets and to see around 60 to 70 receiving yards. So I actually don't mind Treylon Burks. Pitts is out. Yes, Pitts is out. I do think London is in play for that reason at 6,100. I am not going to make a lineup that has 3 guys in the mid 6s, though. I think you do have to spend up a little bit, so we'll probably end up doing that here momentarily. I will get there. Just going to move on to the tight end position here and talk about that. Travis Kelce, 8,200 against the Rams. Doesn't feel necessary, even though he did do well for RR Nation last week in the primetime game for going 3 touchdowns. That's 2 games now where we had Kelce at captain on the 4 touchdown game, and then we had him yesterday or 2 days ago on the 3 touchdown game night. So been running well with Kelce this season. Mark Andrews, something we don't necessarily have to pay up for. Taysom Hill, just have no interest. I know that they want to use him more. I saw reports about that too, but no interest. Tyler Higbee is somewhat interesting. In the game on Sunday, we were looking for 8 to 10 targets, and that's what we got. He's just not always going to be efficient with those targets, so you kind of want a bigger game out of this. But going 50% on the completion rate is not great for this efficiency here. So keep an eye on the Tyler Higbee spot. It's okay. I think David Njoku is a strong option here where he's going to come back healthy. Going face a Tampa Bay team that we know funnels to the opposing tight end. So I don't mind the David Njoku spot. I think a lot of people will be on Foster Moreau, and for good reason. I mean, he's basically been one of the most popular tight ends the entire season. He was basically catchless. If you guys saw the game the other day, he had 1 catch for 33 yards, and it came at pretty much the very tail end of the game, one of the last drives that actually pushed them to go into OT, or either OT or the end of the game there to seal the deal and get the win. I feel very uncomfortable about touting this play. I don't think I'm going to end up going here in cash games, but I feel like he will be quite popular this weekend. As far as other guys go, I think we need to look at potentially Greg Dulcich. Logan Thomas makes for an interesting streamer option if Terry McLaurin's shut down. Appreciate you, Anthony. Thanks for the sub. I think we need to keep an eye on Gerald Everett. I think that there's a few guys in this range that make a lot of sense. If Jamar Chase is out for whatever reason, maybe Hayden Hurst finds himself in a pretty awesome spot at 5,100 against Tennessee. You obviously want more targets from Hurst. He's not really going to get more than 4 to 6, but he's been efficient through that. He just had a bad game the other day against Pittsburgh. Nothing else really sticks out to me here. So for the time being, just with how our roster is constructed, I think we're going to end up going with David Njoku for right now. Okay. Finally, we're going to talk about defense, and then we'll kind of circle back to this wide receiver conversation because we will have a lot of money to spend and potentially spending up at running back too, and we can kind of talk it out from there. As of right now, though, I always want to try to pay down below 4K for the defense, and nothing has really stood out necessarily as far as like this week goes, and we're going to get some of that news here soon, but I don't mind Cleveland going up against Tampa, honestly, because Tampa's been extremely inefficient. I think that all these other ones are kind of hit or miss. Honestly, this part doesn't really bother me. I feel like we can just kind of plug in whatever we want and go from there. I actually kind of want to play Denver because you do get the situation where we don't really know who the starter is, and it's not going to be PJ Walker. I know they have not looked good recently against bad teams, but let's put Denver in here. And I think that the same can be said for honestly playing Carolina in the same game. There probably are going to be better plays that surface. I think this Washington Commanders spot at 4,300 is interesting. It's just a little bit too high for my liking. The Miami Dolphins is somewhat interesting at 4,400 as well. And then I just never really find the need to go all the way up here and play this spot. Maybe on a week like this, you have enough money to where if you're playing all the 3 running backs like we have right now, you could maybe get there. But I'm going to go with the Broncos here and try to get some pressure on whether it's Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. One of those guys is not going to do that well against this defense, especially that secondary. So let's go ahead and do that. We have 9,100 at receiver, and I'm probably going to end up just going with a middling route here. And like we could play Devontae Adams. I feel okay with that, but let's try to upgrade. Let's try to get off the Samaje Perine spot and find a way to play somebody else. So let's go ahead and let's just for this first look, let's swap out Perine and play T. Higgins and assume that Jamar Chase is going to be limited most of the week, which I'm sure he will be. And then let's see what we got here for running back. We can always pay down for defense, so we might have to adjust there. You know what? This is fine. Let's do this. Let's move this around here so it looks nice. Murray and Connor. And we can upgrade the defense now. So maybe we will be able to spend up a little bit. Yeah, all right. That works out pretty well, actually. So what I did here was basically get off the Perine spot and put in another Cincinnati Bengal to match with Joe Burrow. And then we have this James Conner spot of massive production after they cut Eno Benjamin. And I think that the matchup is so clear and away better. The Chargers are allowing a lot of receptions to opposing running backs. They're also giving up a lot on the ground. It's kind of the style of two-shell that they play. And so I like the James Conner spot a lot at 7K, who did not get a price increase whatsoever. And then Miami Dolphins against Houston. Washington's defense was one of the top scoring defenses last week against Houston. Miami is going to be playing outside, and it should be just a huge advantage for them in this spot here. I think that this is actually pretty well constructed. So first look, this is definitely not going to be the final first look build. Last week we had Brian Robinson and Kenyon Drake, which is kind of funny because Kenyon Drake actually ended up being in my lineup and then completely failing after we found out Gus Edwards was inactive. But I like this from a baseline, and I think it's even got some old school stuff in here. Old school correlation of one QB to wide receiver, as well as that running back to defensive correlation. So that's going to do it for the first look for Week 12 FanDuel. Go and watch this on YouTube, and if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe to get more videos. We're doing FanDuel first looks every single week through the Super Bowl, as well as DraftKings first looks every single Wednesday. And I appreciate you all. As always, good night.